think it's really important we talk about our own government's plans as it pertains to Hezbollah, because Netanyahu mentioned Hezbollah. Let's put this next element up on the screen. This is from Axios. This is a story that says the White House has been discussing the possibility of using military force if Hezbollah joins the war in Gaza and attacks Israel with its huge arsenal of rockets. 3 U.S. officials and 1 Israeli official with knowledge of the situation tell Axios. There's a lot in this story. They have been, so just like take that, think about that for just a second, that this is, to Krystal's point, fraught. It's a powder keg, and the White House is now discussing potential military involvement in this conflict. We pay about 1/5 of Israel's military budget every year, but direct American military involvement. Joe Biden is with Netanyahu right now on the plane. John Kirby, obviously his spokesman, said that Biden was there to also, quote, ask some tough questions, I believe is how John Kirby put it. And this is also something that, Krystal, you're going to talk about later in the show, is the kind of divide, the line, the fine line that Biden himself has to walk on some of these questions. And maybe that's what he's trying to do with that. But obviously the timing with the hospital airstrike. I mean, here's more from this Axios story. They say one of the legal justifications for the U.S. using force in case of a Hezbollah attack would be to protect tens of thousands of American citizens who live in Israel. They're quoting Jonathan Lord of the Center for New American Security. He says, under commonly held understandings of Article 2 of the Constitution, the president can enter U.S. forces into hostilities to protect Americans abroad. Now, more from the Axios report. First of all, I just want to say the fact that we're even talking like that, again, to borrow your word, Krystal, is chilling. 2 U.S. officials, according to Axios, said Secretary of State Blinken told Arab leaders in the region with whom he'd met in recent days the U.S. is, quote, not fooling around by sending so many military assets to the region in support of Israel. Okay, Krystal, a lot going on there, but obviously the potential for Hezbollah's involvement, we've seen flare-ups so far, and that's part of, again, this conversation about how fragile this environment is right now and how quickly something can explode into the reason I continue to think about World War I is because you have an assassination, right? You have, like, there's a situation, and maybe people didn't see it that way at the time, but you have a domino effect, essentially, and you never really know when the domino effect has happened until afterwards, and you can look back and see all the other dominoes had fallen. But you know, the Hezbollah involvement, which would certainly coalesce these different coalitions in even clearer terms. When you have the United States talking like this, you have Israel talking like that, you have Putin and Xi talking the way that they're talking, Hamas talking the way that they're talking. Things are really, really in a bad situation right now.
I mean, it's really frightening. It genuinely is. And I thought Dr. Parsi a few days ago laid out, you know, exactly the nightmare scenario of even if, and this is a big if, by the way, even if the U.S., Israel, Iran, Hezbollah don't really want a broader war, you could still end up in a broader war. Mm-hmm. And we are already moving along that chain of escalation, where with this hospital airstrike, and the images of the women and babies that were killed there, the human carnage, you already have this massive swell of just sheer anger and outrage across the region. And that's what undercut and forced the cancellation of Biden's summit with 4 different Arab leaders that was supposed to happen in Jordan, including Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. So those attempts at diplomacy, whatever, you know, however half-baked or unlikely to succeed they were, those are dead. Mm-hmm. You have Hezbollah worried about, you know, their credibility, and they see this also as an existential fight. So far, it seems like they've calculated that they can do just enough to show their solidarity with the Palestinians without igniting this broader conflict. They're going to be under a lot of pressure to do a lot more. And they're going to be motivated to do a lot more. How does Israel respond to that? Now we have these reports that the White House has been actively discussing the possibility of using military force if Hezbollah does get involved and open up this second front in the war. And I want everybody to understand what you were saying there, Emily. It's important to underscore this. They're not going to go to the American people and ask us if we want to get involved in a broader war. they're already laying out their legal justification for how they could put us in this war without ever taking it to the United States Congress, let alone the American people.
It's in the Axios report.
That's exactly right. That's how much of an edge we are on right now.
Yeah, they say, this is from the expert Axios is quoting, if Biden were to make that decision, he'd need to notify Congress within 48 hours under the War Power Resolutions Act of 1973. That would give Biden 60 days to act before Congress's approval to use military force would be required. And that's if they go that route. We've seen them not go that route before and essentially never authorize these types of conflicts. But again, under the War Powers Resolution of 1973, he can get involved in a conflict that would have years-long implications, ramifications. And the fact that this isn't outrageous in the Axios report, that it isn't something that is treated like it's outrageous in the Axios report, tells you exactly where we are as a country, that it's just sort of casual, that he can take this to Congress within 60 days of getting involved in the conflict, and then it'll all be fine, it'll be constitutional, because to your point, Krystal, he could get us involved in this. And in fact, the signs are, let's put the next element up on the screen, and No Breaking Points covered this yesterday, the Pentagon has ordered 2,000 more U.S. troops to be ready to deploy to the Middle East. If deployed, they would likely not serve in combat roles, but would provide advice and medical support to Israeli forces, officials said. And this news got overshadowed yesterday in the wake of the hospital strike. We can put this up. This is the next element, B4. This is a press release from CENTCOM. CENTCOM commander arrives in Israel. General Michael Eric Kurilla, commander, U.S. Central Command, has arrived in Tel Aviv, Israel, to conduct high-level meetings with Israel's military leadership, including their chief of defense, to gain a clear understanding of Israel's defense requirements. Now, again, this is worth remembering. The Axios story did point this out too. There are thousands of American citizens that live in Israel. We do have strategic interests in Israel. All of that is true. There are American lives to protect. There are humanitarian reasons to care about what's happening both in Israel, in the wake of Hamas's brutal attack, and in Gaza as people try to evacuate or try to decipher what they should do based on what Hamas is telling them to do. Absolutely. Thousands of American lives on the line. You want to deter people from taking action. So that's where you have Blinken's kind of laughable quote where he said the U.S. is not fooling around by, putting troops and warships and stuff in the region or resources in the region. So the tough talk has a strategic purpose, of course, but there's obviously also the risk that the tough talk amplifies tensions artificially in order to sound tough. And then you have to put your money where your mouth is in a way that ultimately is not a strategic benefit or something that's constitutional or something that the country wants at all. And polling, Krystal, shows most Americans have no interest in a military conflict over Palestine at this moment.
There's so much to say here. I mean, the original intent, I believe, of Biden's trip to the region, which occurred before the horrors of this hospital airstrike, was to try to act as a deterrent, try to talk to the parties involved, try to dissuade. I mean, this is what behind the scenes the White House is telling reporters at all kinds of news outlets, that they're trying to dissuade any of the other actors in the region, be it Hezbollah, be it Iran, not to up the tensions. So the idea by sending these two carrier strike groups and by Blinken being in the region, Biden traveling to the region, was to try to have a deterrent effect on these other actors. Now, with the context of this hospital bombing, Biden's trip actively exacerbates and in a way pours fuel on the fire of the rage that we already see overflowing in this region. And that's why, it's so consequential that this meeting that he had planned in Jordan was canceled after the other leaders. We can't be part of this now. There's no way we can talk to you about any potential diplomacy now. The other thing that I really think it's important for people to bear in mind here in terms of interpreting Netanyahu's action in the context in which he's making speeches saying axis of evil, the godforsaken term, comparing to Nazis, comparing to ISIS, comparing to 9/11, saying this is a civilizational struggle, is he is fighting for his political life. Mm-hmm. The majority of Israelis want him gone. They say after the war is over, we want you out. He was already an extraordinary, controversial, divisive figure amongst the Israeli public before the dramatic intelligence and military failures that contributed to the massive, horrific death toll of Israeli civilians in this Hamas attack. You have some 90+% who blame him in part for those failures. So he is very committed to holding on to power in whatever way he possibly can. So this sort of extremely bellicose rhetoric, I believe he's hoping will trigger this sort of rally around the flag effect so that he can hold on to power. So it adds a level of additional danger to the situation that you have a politician here desperate to hold on to power who is making these decisions and upping the ante with both his rhetoric and with his actions. And another thing I don't want to lose sight of here, and then we can move on to what I think we always have to keep at the forefront, which is the human beings, the innocent human beings who are caught up in the horror of this conflict. But the other thing to keep in mind here is that Netanyahu and the Israeli government have admitted they have no plan for the day after. Like, going in and bombing the hell out of Gaza is easy for the Israeli military. It's no problem. They can do that all day long, with our support and our weaponry and all that they've invested and all the reservists that they've called up. That is no problem. Once you've taken out Hamas, which is both, military and political leadership, what then? Who runs Gaza? Are you going to reoccupy? Who's going to fill that vacuum? And they have acknowledged, Emily, that they have no plan for that. I mean, it is very reminiscent of Iraq and how we went in with, guns blazing and mission accomplished. Hey, that was the easy part. What comes next? And of course, I mean, we never should have been there in the first place. That goes without saying. But that's one of the things that the Biden administration has been questioning. You mentioned that Biden was saying we're going to ask some tough questions as a friend, but they're also unwilling to use any points of real leverage to try to, get at some sort of a plan for what this is going to look like and what comes next. And that just adds to the overall chaos, volatility, and danger of the situation.
And the sad thing is that they're not wrong, that there are these coalescing forces of, let's say, extremism in the region that do believe, in some cases, in terrorism as sort of a righteous way to clap back at Western imperialism, Western colonialism, which has been very real in their region for a long time. And so it's not that it's entirely untrue that there are these coalescing forces that wish America, that wish the West harm. But when you talk like that and have absolutely no plan for what steps into the power vacuum, I mean, just now we're talking about a hospital strike that potentially was committed by Palestinian Islamic Jihad as one of the potential actors implicated in the strike. Hamas is not the only group, and that's why Israel obviously in some cases was funneling resources to Hamas over the years, because they thought it was a better alternative if we empower Hamas kind of covertly. We've seen the West make that mistake time and time and again, not just Israel.
Oh, yeah.
But if we empower this one group, it'll help, stabilize things, et cetera, and you end up just creating a Frankenstein monster. And so when you have no plan as to what happens when, there's a story on Al Jazeera's homepage this morning asking if Gaza is Israel's Stalingrad. But it's, you can look at Aleppo, you can look at Fallujah. What happens in those power vacuums when people are engaged in urban warfare in basically blast zones that have just been, taken off the face of the earth, but people are hiding in different places. These are recipes for even more extremism to fester. And so I would be very curious to hear what the plan is. But obviously we know that there really isn't one at the moment. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.